We're coming on the air with breaking news, a major decision from the Supreme Court that could have larger implications on gun laws nationwide. The justices have ruled that people who are under domestic violence restraining orders cannot possess a firearm. The ruling upholds at least some limits on who can own a weapon. I want to go right to correspondent Laura Jarrett right now to explain. You've read through this decision. What exactly does it mean?
Yes, Lester, this is a major victory for the federal government that wanted to make sure that people who had been deemed dangerous because they had domestic violence restraining orders cannot possess firearms. There have been a slew of different lawsuits and examinations of the exact parameters of this federal law. The Fifth Circuit had tried to strike it down, but today the Supreme Court, by a division of 8-1, saying no, this federal law can stand. And I want to read a key portion of the decision where the Chief Justice explains the reasoning here. He says, when a restraining order contains a finding that an individual poses a credible threat to the physical safety of an intimate partner, that individual may, consistent with the Second Amendment, be banned from possessing firearms while that order is in effect. This had really been an examination, Lester, of a decision just 2 years ago where the Supreme Court gave sort of a redefining of the Second Amendment and the rights of individuals to possess firearms in public. And since that decision, Lester, there's been sort of a cottage industry of different courts grappling with what are those limits, what does it look like, how are we supposed to interpret history and tradition consistent with the Second Amendment. And today the High Court is saying, and we're going to work through the reasoning, but today the High Court is saying there are limits and that if someone is dangerous and has been deemed dangerous, they cannot possess a firearm. So again, a major victory for the federal government and the Biden administration.
All right, legal analyst Danny Savalos also here with us. What's the wider impact of this ruling?
The wider impact is that this is yet another in a series of very rare decisions by the Supreme Court on the Second Amendment at all. There are only a handful in the last 50 years. And recent decisions had said that the government can disarm people under the Second Amendment if they are not law-abiding and not responsible. The government here argued that that not responsible prong included people who are dangerous. And it's important to note that this doesn't apply to all domestic violence orders. Very specific domestic violence orders where there's a hearing and specific findings that someone is essentially a dangerous person. So the court looked back at historical precedent from the 1700s and 1800s and found analogs, similar laws where people who posed a threat for some reason or another were disarmed. And that gave them the historical basis under the new framework, the new guidance from the court, to conclude that the Second Amendment allowed this federal law, which disarms a number of different people. It's really important to note, Lester, this is just one subsection of many subsections of a federal disarmament law. And it's interesting because other parts of this law continue to be litigated, including in front of the Supreme Court, felon in possession and some of the other subsections. So this is just one prong of a law that is very much under attack.
All right, Danny, I'll ask you to stand by for more on the politics of all this. Let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson. Hallie, how will this be read in political circles?
Well, Lester, to be honest, based on what we know from the ruling so far, it upholds what is essentially the status quo here. After the Supreme Court had strengthened gun rights essentially within the last 18 months or so, this is a ruling that is obviously significant, a big win for the Biden administration. Politically, however, it is a real question as to whether it actually animates anybody where I'm sitting here in Washington. I will tell you that to the immense frustration of many Democrats who want to see further restrictions on gun laws, President Biden has repeatedly called for more restrictions on gun laws. There is not much of an animating force in Congress to do much about it, especially not in an election year. It is simply not seen as one of the bigger issues right now that has any chance of working through Congress. That has been the case even after a series of mass shootings in this country, Lester. Again, Democrats have been very vocal about wanting to see more done on this. So politically, not much of a jump ball here, but we're going to see how the Biden administration reacts to this significant ruling, Lester.
All right, Hallie, thank you. Our senior White House correspondent, Gabe Gutierrez, joins us now. Gabe, has the White House responded to this ruling yet?
Hi there, Lester. We're awaiting a statement from the White House any moment now, but so far we have not heard directly from White House officials on this ruling that just happened moments ago. But as Hallie was mentioning, Lester, this will be considered a major win for the Biden administration. It was back in 2022, just after the Uvalde shooting, that President Biden signed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and that law broadened some gun restrictions, again, shortly after the Uvalde shooting, and it closed the so-called boyfriend loophole, which some critics had said was a loophole that allowed dating partners, not just spouses, to be able to acquire guns even though they may have been convicted of domestic abuse. So again, this, as Hallie was alluding to, this will be considered a win for the Biden administration, which has suggested that more gun restrictions are needed in order to keep communities safe. But Lester, we are awaiting any formal comment from the White House any moment now.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thanks. Let's go back to senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett. You've been poring over this. What else stands out? Yeah,
it's interesting. The Chief Justice is really trying to give some guidance to lower courts here that have been grappling with how to read that decision back from 2022 that we've been talking about. And they say here the Second Amendment permits more than just those regulations identical to ones that could be found in 1791. So in other words, you don't have to look back to the finding only to decide whether or not this type of regulation is legal. They say holding otherwise would be as mistaken as applying the protections of the right only to muskets and sabers. So essentially recognizing this is not 1791, this is 2024, and there are some limits, again, on who can possess a firearm in this country.
And Danny, you had mentioned the court has not really delved into the Second Amendment much, but we saw the bump stock ruling last week, not a Second Amendment case,
exactly.
and not inconsistent then.
Not inconsistent. In fact, the bump stock decision had nothing at all to do with the Second Amendment. It was a statutory reading of a law defining whether or not a trigger pull or a trigger function defines a gun as a machine gun. So the Second Amendment in this case, the litigation is ongoing. There's another case called Range that is coming before the court on the felon in possession statute. Just to give you an idea, statistically, this subsection, the domestic violence subsection of 922 of the gun statute, is almost never prosecuted. Far more significant will be when Range, the felon in possession, when that comes before the court, and it is coming before the court because that is the one that the government prosecutes all the time in comparison to this one.
All right, Danny and Laura, thanks to you both. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCNews.com, and I'll have a full wrap-up tonight on NBC Nightly News. We're going to return most of you to the Today Show. I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, New York. Good day. Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.